students here tonight. So I would like to welcome all of you to government business. It's going to be pretty dry, so hope you had some coffee or a Red Bull or something before you came. But welcome. Hope you enjoy yourselves. Make sure if we need to sign anything or for proof of your attendance, don't be afraid after the meeting to stop up and we'll get everything taken care of for you. So thanks for coming. Item number one on the agenda is a work session to discuss the proposed text amendments to the following sections of the zoning resolution. I think maybe before I talk about that, we'll talk about the memorandum, because I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the work session here. It was produced by Heather, and it's regarding the proposed zoning text amendments. Basically, it says the purpose of this memo is to provide you with a summary of the changes in the proposed zoning text amendments since our last discussion in October and November of this year. Should you have any questions or concerns, we can discuss more at the meeting. Section 5, definitions. We're adding new definitions for urban winery, tasting room, and modified the existing definition of microbrewery and microdistillery. Number 2, Section 13, conditional uses. Section 13.35, modified conditions to include urban winery. Number 3, Section 22, commercial and industrial districts. Added additional uses to the BS district, including microbrewery, microdistillery, urban winery, and personal services. Personal services are a type of retail establishment that are compatible to traditional retail stores and are desirable uses in the corridor. Also expanded microbrewery, microdistillery, and urban winery to be conditional uses in the GB and the B1 districts, and added urban winery as a conditional use in the C district. Section 15, on point number 4, Section 15, residential districts, dwellings must be set back a minimum of 36 feet from the curb of any private road. This in essence will allow 4 cars to be parked in the driveway with at least 2 enclosed spaces that are already required in the section. This should be adequate for guests without the minimum setback from private drives. Houses were being located approximately 20 feet from the road, which only allowed 2 cars to be parked rather than 4. And on the 5th point, Section 29, off-street parking for multiple family buildings, a minimum of 4 parking spaces per unit are required, plus guest parking at a rate of 1 space per unit, and added parking requirements for the microbrewery, microdistillery, and urban winery. So that's in addition to what we're going to discuss on the agenda this evening. Heather, why don't you come on up and kind of review everything that you've done between the last meeting and now for us?
Yeah, so thank you. Andy, you did you read the memo. So I know at the last meeting, Sydney presented some the research that we had found on the microbreweries, microdistilleries, and the urban wineries, and at that time we had suggested some potential amendments. And as part of the packet tonight, I've incorporated some of those in there for your consideration. And we can discuss those if you'd like. Some of the regular members weren't present at that meeting, so I don't know if you've read up on the minutes or not. But if you're looking at the definitions section, section 5, on page 15 or 5.15, if you recall, for a microbrewery, we are proposing, it's number 125 for microbrewery, to modify the existing definition to reference a tasting room rather than a tavern. And then we are contemplating changing the brewing capacity from the 15,000 barrels to gallons, or from gallons to barrels. I didn't have a good read on you whether or not if you thought the 15,000 barrels would be acceptable. I know that that's kind of is the industry terminology based on our research, that the microbrewery is somewhere between 1,000 and up to 15,000 barrels. So that was, we can discuss that more if you guys want to. I know it's currently set up as a conditional use. It still would be a conditional use, and that's regulated in section 13.35. And we are proposing a couple modifications in there too, that upon someone applying for a conditional use to start one of those in Concord, that they would be required to submit documentation that addresses potential impacts at full brewing capacity. So if they're gonna, if their maximum brewing capacity is going to be 5,000 barrels per year, and yet they're only going to start off with maybe 500, they still need to provide what the traffic impacts could be if they were going to brew at full capacity, what other kind of potential impacts there could be in relationship to wastewater treatment as well, because we found that can be an issue too, with discharging that into the sanitary sewer and whether or not there's adequate facilities for that, which is regulated by the county. So we would be looking for them to provide that documentation from the county that they have adequate facilities for that. And then while we were discussing, the microbrewery and microdistillery uses, and looking a little bit more at what an urban winery might look like, we started looking at, well, where would it be compatible in Concord? As you know, currently, the distilleries and the breweries are allowed in the Capital District, and that's, for those that don't know where that is, that's kind of located where the new roundabout is at Auburn and Capitol, and then heading east to State Route 44 and over to the new section, and over to Cryle Road. That is like the corridor of where it's zoned Capital District. So it would have been very limited to that area. However, we're proposing to allow those uses within the B1 district, which some of that is located on Cryle Road. And then also the BX, which is also on Cryle Road. I'm just grabbing my zoning napkin. Yeah, mainly and then there are some B1 over on the western portion of the township by 84 and Old Johnny Cake. Where some of the trends that we're seeing is the microbreweries are actually kind of locating within, strip centers and also freestanding buildings. So I think that those would be compatible uses in those districts as well. Yes.
I noticed then the micro distillers were referring to it in gallons rather than barrels, like microbreweries.
But that is
Is that
correct.
okay?
That is the way that the distillery and the breweries kind of, they view it, they measure it differently. I don't know if you want to comment on that. You're kind of Andy,
Yeah, connoisseur.
a novice when it comes
What
to
are you inferring?
You know a little bit about both, so.
No, I agree. I think that, and I think the research that was done previously, I think, kind of covered all the bases on both the microbrewery and the microdistillery, as well as the urban winery section. I think that the quantities are right. I don't think that we're, hamstringing anybody that might want to bring that business to the township and, create that kind of an environment. 8,000 gallons of, I happened to meet at a chamber meeting the other day. There was a guy that was at my table that just opened up I think he's been around for a little while, but he's got a micro distillery in Perry off of Lane Road there, down by the nuclear plant. And he does 50 gallon batches. So, 50 gallons is, when you're talking
8,000.
8,000, that's a lot. That's 50, he does 50 gallon batch. Now, that doesn't mean it's just 50 gallon. I mean, he's doing multiple batches in a month, but still, if he's doing, 300 or 400, gallons a month, that's not even, close to touching the amount of micro distillery, 8,000 gallons per year. That's quite a bit. So I think that's a good number. And he's probably typical. A tip would be like a typical example, just like Red Eagle out in Madison, probably the same thing, probably, I think 8,000, gallons is a pretty good number for that, so I think we're in pretty good shape there. So.
Heather, I have a question, going back to the microbrewery. I just read where a company, or a group purchased a building in downtown Painesville, and they're going to turn it into a brew pub. Is a brew pub definition-wise the same as a microbrewery, or is that different?
Even smaller.
Okay. Do we need a definition in here for a brew pub? I mean,
I don't know. know, because we specify a maximum capacity, so I'm wondering if a brew pub
But
could.
but my question on that though would
Yeah.
be, is the brew pub producing or are they importing? You know, 'cause
don't
not
know.
all brew pubs are making
Right.
beer on site. Some
Right.
brew pubs are basically, they just have a restaurant and they're specializing in beer. They have a lot of tap handles, you know, a lot of different beers on tap, but they don't really,
Yeah, I didn't see in the
yeah,
article.
if they're brewing on site or not.
Right,
I think that makes a difference,
okay.
you know. But I don't know, you know, that brings up a valid point though, that we want to consider adding, you know, brew pub or, well, technically, I mean, a brew pub kind of falls almost pretty much in line with
I was
any
gonna
kind
say,
of a bar
but our
restaurant.
other zoning ought to cover, I
Yeah.
mean, the ability to add that sort of, if it's just a bar restaurant, and a brew pub is a phrase within that. And we should have already been covering that, I would think.
Well, I think our definition of microbrewery would include brewery, which is based on some of the research that was presented last month, and just looking at it again real quickly. Brewery that produces less than 1,000 is considered a very small brewing company. Those between 1,000 and just under 15,000 is what's the mid-size, which we're coining as the microbrewery. And then there's the brew pub that crafts less than 750.
Yeah,
We're
Barrels.
capturing all of that
Yeah,
from
so-
zero all the way up.
yeah.
Yeah. I
So
think
we're
the-
covered,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
It's a good point though, Rich.
Yeah, it is. I read that article too.
Yeah.
So if we're comfortable with that, I'd like to leave that in as one of the other amendments, unless you guys feel otherwise. That was one of the other changes.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think we're good there.
So that kind of leads me back into looking at in section 22, which is the commercial and industrial district section, the table of permitted and conditional uses. So we started looking at the table of uses when I started putting in, weighing the idea of, what districts would the microbrewery, distillery, and urban winery be compatible in. There seemed to be, a couple other districts that we could add a few uses to. One, additional in the business interchange district. Personal services seem to be a use that would be compatible. As we know, like retail's kind of changing now, and we're seeing less brick and mortar stores or people going in buying, clothes and things like that, but more experience-based type of retail and service-type bases. So the thought was to allow personal services in the BX, and then after sending this to, I was kind of thinking about the B2. We could also consider adding that as a permitted use in the B2 district. Some of the B2 is zoned right over here on Ravenna Road. There could be an instance where maybe someone wants to convert, we have a lot of non-conforming single-family dwellings that are zoned commercial on the Ravenna Road corridor, where I could see someone maybe coming in and wanting to open up like a small, like, hair salon or nail shop or something like that, would be a nice fit in that district as well. We're also getting some requests from some people looking for suitable areas for dry cleaner, which I know we don't really have. We don't have one anymore in Concord or on the west side. Closed, so if we can expand those districts too, where that might be a suitable use, there might be more additional properties where that could happen, and that would fall under personal services.
I think it makes good sense.
Okay. And then I know we had been, in section 15, which is the residential district, we were talking about the R3 for quite some time on, do we require them to have guest parking, or what can we do to make sure, since there's private streets in those developments, how can we make sure that there's going to be adequate parking, off-street parking for those developments? And last month we had, I had suggested that we put in a minimum setback for the dwellings off the private streets. So if you recall, in the R3, developers can build single-family detached cluster dwellings, which looks like your traditional single-family home. But we were finding that they were putting them like 20 feet off the street, which in essence only allowed you to park 2 cars in the drive. And then people weren't using their garages for cars, you know, they use them for storage, and then there's just not enough parking. So the thought was to require the single-family dwellings, detached cluster dwellings, to be set back a minimum of 36 feet from the curb of the private street, which would allow the 4 cars to park. And then the idea was for, if someone was going to do a development with the multifamily buildings, which is where you have the 3 to 8 attached units, we would require guest parking at a ratio, I think we talked about this in the past, of 1 additional parking spot for every 5 units built. So in that type of development, there would be like small little parking areas throughout the community. But for the cluster dwellings, I think it would be easier maintenance-wise and look nicer if we weren't having the small little parking areas for the single-family homes.
The cluster homes that are going in now on Cryle in Quail Hollow, are they, do you know what they are? As far as
The setbacks, and that's the PUD district, which it's very, you know, there aren't really any minimums set.
Okay.
It's another thing where we don't have a lot of say. But I think they're ranging around 21 to 25 feet setback. But, so by putting it in now for the R3, anything new is going to have to meet it. We
Right.
can't,
Right.
obviously, we can't retro anything. Anything that
Right.
exists
Yeah,
is still
yeah.
going to be lawful.
Yeah, we can't go back and change what's already
Yeah.
in process, but we can certainly, you know, be proactive moving forward. I think that's a good idea to do that.
Yeah.
So guest parking would be 1 additional per how many?
1 additional per every 5 units.
For every 5?
Yeah. And that's for if they build the multifamily buildings, the actual buildings with 3 to 8 units attached. And that's in section 29. We added that to the table, the parking table. So if you're looking on page 29.5, I've also included in the table specifically the detached single-family cluster dwellings to kind of back up the setback that they have to provide the 4 spaces per unit. Oh, then 2 shall be enclosed. Actually, that's the same way it was, but under the multifamily dwelling,
Okay, so
added the plus guest parking at a ratio of 1 space for every 5 dwelling units. And then while we're looking at that table too, we went ahead and included in a parking tally for the microbrewery, distillery, and urban winery. You must provide 1 space for every 75 square feet of usable area in the bar, restaurant, or tasting room area, plus 1 space for every employee on max shift, plus 1 space for every 400 square feet of the gross floor area of the production area. And that would be where they're producing the beer. Let's see, I have a couple other things marked here. Oh, there was, back in the landscape section, on page 38, I guess it's point 4. I met with, I spoke again with Lake County Stormwater Department in regards to some of the stormwater provisions that we're adding to the parking section, allowing the bioretention and the permeable pavers. Because after the last meeting, Jerry had a question on whether or not one of the things we had in the parking section that related to lot coverage was going to conflict with how the county calculated impervious surface area. So I had a good conversation with them, and they went ahead and reviewed the text that we were proposing in the parking section that allows the permeable pavers and the porous pavement and the bioretention within the parking islands. And they were pleased to see that zoning even cared about that. They thought it was kind of neat. And they were good with what we were putting in there. They did have one suggestion that we remove the ability for folks to allow to do sand filters. And honestly, I'm not really clear what that is. I know that was model language that was given to us from Sugar and River Watershed Partners. So we took out the line item that referred to sand filters. But I did notice after sending this to you, there was a reference still to that in section 38, on page 38.4, paragraph G. Where
The revised 38.4?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's,
And that was where?
It's in G.
Paragraph
right
G.
above the photo that shows the figure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
wanted to
So as
remove it.
permitted in section 29.060, any interior landscaping island where bioretention cells, and I was gonna strike out, you could strike out on your thing, in your copy there, or sand filters, because we were not gonna permit those. Bioretention cells are proposed.
And what was the reasoning?
I think it was because the maintenance on them, they struggle with making sure that they're working properly, and they're not something that the county is really approving as part of their retention. The bioretention cells, they're comfortable with as far as allowing, approving as part of their stormwater management, stormwater quality, but the sand filters was something that they didn't think that they would even allow. So they're suggesting that we just take that out.
Because it doesn't do an adequate job, or it's too
What's
much
that?
maintenance?
I think it's a lot of the maintenance, and then just the concept isn't something that they've approved. I can get back to you 100% on that, but.
Because sand has a tendency, needless to say, to absorb and filter better than other, means as far as landscaping is concerned. I just know
Mhm.
about that based on some personal involvements in the past. I think it's maintenance.
yeah.
I bet it's maintenance.
It's probably the maintenance, yeah.
Because it has such good capabilities of
So
filtering.
what's the fear then, that the building or property owner won't properly maintain it? Is that the fear, or?
I think the county doesn't want to do it. They get involved with, especially when they have sewer problems and stuff. That can become a hassle. You have to be more religious in taking care of that kind of a system. Especially when you live up in this climate around here, with the snow and the salt and everything that we have here.
True.
It becomes more of a, I'm sure it's probably a maintenance issue.
Mhm.
Down south, they use it a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure that's probably it. But if you don't mind confirming that.
Sure, yeah. Just on that topic anyway, we wouldn't, as you know, the township wouldn't be reviewing the details of whatever the plans were for the bioretention or the
Right.
sand filters if they were gonna be doing.
Is that
those.
controlled by the county?
The county
stormwater?
would approve that as part of their stormwater management requirements. They have to treat not only the amount of stormwater that's flowing off the property, but the quality of that stormwater too. And that's where the bioretention cells and then the potential sand filters come in for treating the
Yeah.
quality of the water.
Sure.
It's part of the Ohio EPA Phase 2 requirements. But we are adding a provision in here too that requires folks to put up a small sign indicating that you can't push snow on these areas because that tends to be an issue too.
Right.
So the county was very happy to see that we were going to do that too, because you can tell your snowplow guys not to push snow somewhere, but
Yeah.
I mean, they're not going to know if they have someone else come in. And hopefully if there's a sign saying, don't push snow here, then they won't. So. So So that kind of wraps up and elaborates a little bit more based on what was in the memo here. I know we've pretty much talked about everything else at nauseum, so I don't know if there's anything else anyone else wants to bring up or you didn't want to include in here, or
Nope.
if we want to maybe accept these changes, and if you're ready to maybe move forward with scheduling a public hearing, we could do that. If you want to take a little bit more time, we can do that too.
When we have the public hearing, all of this is available to the public, right? Here, is it on the TV too, or where they can scroll through it if they want?
The amendments,
Yeah.
we can post it on the website too.
Yeah, that'd be a good
Yeah, all the
Because that was
text
the
amendments.
biggest thing that they were complaining about
Yeah.
during the election, using as a negative,
Yeah,
that the public wasn't keeping informed of everything we were doing, which you know is a bunch of you-know-what.
yeah.
So I just want to confirm that, you know, that
Yeah, I'll
it's going
post
to
it on the website.
be here for them to come in. They can see it on the TV.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know how much more we can do other than spoon-feeding people, you know, this information that's readily available, but they just don't take time to come and research it. But yet, when something comes up, they're out there screaming and yelling that we were doing something behind closed doors. And that upsets me to no end, as you can see.
Well, I mean, anyone that wants to request a copy, if they can't find it on the website, or wants to come in and view it, or wants to just talk about it, or doesn't understand it, we're always willing to do that,
Okay,
so.
thank you.
So you would post this agenda and all the...
And I have this, you know, as I email it to you guys every month, or we try to, if the document's
Right.
not that big, I can post that right on our website, on the
Oh, that's
zoning
a good
commission
idea.
page, or on the
Yeah.
homepage of the zoning department, you know, if we, you know, I mean, all the agendas and the transcripts and the videos are always linked on the website too, so you can go back and view previous work sessions and tonight's meeting, and
How long do we keep videos in our meetings?
you know what, I'm not clear on the records retention policy of the meetings. I don't know.
Because, you know, we've been working on this, for example, for a long time.
Yeah, I think we have at least all of last year. I know we had a problem, we lost some videos due to some issues with the previous system that we were using. Now we're posting all the videos on YouTube, so we shouldn't have any problems keeping those in perpetuity, honestly. At some point, we'll probably have to delete some, but I don't know the policy offhand. I can find out for you.
Yeah, would you please?
Yeah.
So I can answer phone calls when people ask.
But I mean, the transcripts, we keep those forever.
Okay.
So those will always be there, and you can read it word for word.
Okay.
Any other questions for me at this point, or? No? Okay.
Anybody from the board have any comments or questions with regards to the work session on the amendments, numbers 1 through 11?
As far as I can see, scanning through here, I didn't notice anything abruptly really different than what we haven't discussed in the past. Unless I missed something.
I would agree.
I saw nothing new or out of the ordinary.
Right.
Kind of consistent with the work we've been doing. I mean, we've had a couple months here, a little rework, and then we've been working on a line share of these well into last year. So I think it represents a good body of work. So I think we can move forward to the public hearing.
Yeah, I think we're pretty good, Heather, on this. I don't really see, you know, we've kind of gone over this multiple times, you know, reviewed everything, and I think we're ready. You think we're ready? I mean, getting legal to review and,
Yeah, I did meet with legal between last meeting and this month to review the provisions that we are changing in regards specifically to the site plan review, and just making sure the language was correct, tight between that section and design review and the zoning permit
Think we'll get
requirements.
any, is there any, you think there'll be any feedback or whatever from the Lake County Planning Commission?
Based on their previous comments, they probably will have some repeat modifications, but overall, I'm confident that they'll suggest, or that they'll recommend that we adopt the amendments with some modifications. We'll see what those are.
Right.
Just based on what we did previously.
Any of the county entities need to weigh in? For the most part, we're good, or?
I mean, as I said, I met with soil and water, or I mean, stormwater, in regards to that, and I think that was the bulk of, most of the amendments. So I don't feel like we need to meet with any of the county agencies on
Right.
the other small changes we're making.
When the state comes down with new changes to regulations, no matter where it might be, do we have to go back? Are they requiring us to go back and make changes on this right away? Like when they change things, like for example, for septic systems and that kind of stuff. The state, we revert to the state. If they make a change, it automatically reverts to the state requirements rather than this, or do? Because I know we try to make changes to keep relatively to the state requirements.
Right. Well, that specific example, if there were changes in septic laws, we wouldn't have anything to change in our zoning per se, because we're not regulating septic systems with the
Right.
zoning code. But where we might need to make changes to the zoning code is when they make changes to the Ohio Revised Code in regards to what townships can regulate as far as zoning. So 519.12, 519.21, I know last year they had some changes to the ORC that allows townships to regulate agribusinesses, like the agritourism. So if we wanted to make changes to regulate that somewhat within Concord, we could, but we're pretty current with what the statute says as far as what townships are allowed to regulate as far as zoning goes. We try to keep our eyes open to those amendments and decide whether or not we need to make changes. One topic that we haven't really discussed as a township is the medical marijuana growing facilities and dispensaries, and whether or not those are uses that we would want to permit or not permit in the community. We've had a few inquiries from people that are looking to locate dispensaries. I've probably responded to about 3 different inquiries asking what the stance was from the township yet, and basically the response was that we hadn't really broached that subject. I know up until the last couple of months, we really weren't clear on how the state was going to regulate it, so we're kind of waiting to see, but that might be something that we need to look at, or at least discuss and decide with some input, obviously, from the community, if that's a use that would be desirable in our community or not. So, I mean, that would be an example of how we may or may not need to change zoning based on the state law.
Can we technically prohibit it?
I think you can. Yeah, I
Really?
mean, as a use.
Because didn't we run into that with the gaming,
Oh,
the casino, the online gaming facilities? Didn't we run into that where we had to allow it, but we could really be restrictive as to where it could go?
I'm not sure on that one. I wasn't in this position
I
at that
do
time.
remember that. I
but-
do remember
Remember,
that,
Like
yeah.
internet cafes.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
internet
We talked
cafe
about
stuff.
that,
We
yeah.
had, because I was under the impression that we couldn't prohibit it completely. We had to make allowances, but we could be very specific and put some real difficult requirements on it to where it would make it
And it's the same with
undesirable.
Yeah.
the SOBs too.
Yeah.
Sexual owned business.
Yeah.
We have to allow it
Yeah, we
somewhere
can't
in the township.
completely
Can't.
prohibit it.
Correct.
Yep.
because of some, was it had to do with the Ohio revised, with the Ohio
I think that's a federal,
or
maybe.
federal?
Yeah, I know with the SOBs, you can't prohibit those, you have to accommodate them somewhere, but you can be very strict as we've decided to do.
Because I remember having conversations a while ago about the internet cafes, you know.
I think gambling as a byproduct of what they offered was one of the issues we talked about then, but.
Yeah, I'm thinking,
Well,
so, I mean, when it comes down to something like the medical marijuana dispensaries and/or related businesses, and, you know, would we be required to have to allow that?
that's a good question. I haven't spoken with our legal counsel on that.
We should probably take a look at that.
Yeah.
Because I know
Better
there's-
to be proactive.
Yeah, I know the states already, I think, are, based on what they've already had on the news, they already have targeted places where they're gonna allow it already,
Yeah.
I think.
They've already
And then by the
given-
first of the year, they can already start growing it and dispensing it
Mhm.
at these locations. I don't recall if townships got involved with that or not, but
Yeah, that's where, would that be would we have the ability to restrict that or dictate that, or would we fall under a higher level of authority and having to allow it?
I think
And
as
then
the
we have to
local
accommodate
community.
it, and then we
Yeah, I
have
mean,
to
the
figure
local
out-
community can decide whether or not, where and how many and if you're going to allow it, but whether or not we can strictly prohibit that is a good question. I have to check with, you know, our legal counsel on that, or if we have to accommodate it. I feel like we don't have to, because some communities already have said that they're not allowing them, but obviously we'd want to refer to our township legal counsel before we were going to do something like that.
And wouldn't there be separate qualifications for like selling it and then growing?
Yeah, yeah, you could
And you'd have to
regulate the dispensaries
regu-
differently
right.
than you would the production facilities, yeah. Could see like the production facilities would probably be located in more industrial type areas, while the dispensaries could be, you know, in locations like Gristmill or,
yeah.
you know, just in little strip centers, little retail establishments, so.
Something we need to take a look at.
Mhm.
That's a good one.
Better to be prepared.
Okay. We can put that on one of our next items, you know,
Yeah, boy, if you
on our
could,
list of.
between now and our next meeting, if you could just find out briefly about that, that'd be helpful.
Oh, okay, sure.
Because if it is something that maybe it might be something we want to incorporate into here somewhere, right? It would have to be.
Well, we could always address that as a separate issue.
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't say hold this up.
No, I
Yeah.
won't say hold it up, but I mean,
Right.
it'd be nice to know,
Okay.
please.
So do you think we could schedule a public hearing for this in January, or do you think that's too aggressive with the holidays and the time off between, you know, Christmas and New Year's, and I think
Well, we are scheduled to have our January 2nd meeting unless,
January 2nd?
it's January
The day
2nd,
after.
so.
Wow.
Day after,
Okay.
people are still
Really close
recuperating.
to-
Yeah, I mean, that's up to you guys. As far as,
Do we have to be completely coherent and about to have the ability to think
To
clearly
perform.
after that? You said, you think that's too aggressive?
unless you want us to just, staff and legal to look at it one more time and just be sure we're good for, and then come back with those, couple little, the one red line I had said in section 38, and then adding the other couple, personal services to the BX and the
Yeah.
B2, if you'd
What do you think,
like us
Frank?
to wait one more month
Think
and
we could do
digest it a little bit
January,
more,
or do
we
you think
can.
we ought to put it off to February?
Well, I think with the holidays coming up in general, putting a load on Heather and her staff, you know.
We're not supposed to be compassionate here, Frank. We got work to do.
Right. It's totally up to you. If you feel
It's not any more work to do it January or February for me. so.
Right.
all right.
Morgan, any thoughts? No?
Unless we
We've
feel
kind of
up
covered
to
the
it.
ground, I mean, if Heather says she's right, you know, I mean, we've covered this, we've had 2 work sessions of late, and then how many last year? I mean,
a lot.
indifferent on it, we can go if you're ready.
The only thing I'm thinking is, if, it might behoove us to put it off till February, because we're gonna put it online, we're gonna allow people for the public hearing to be able to read through it. Realistically, nobody's gonna do that in December, and this would give them the opportunity in January, things slow down a little, to review, if they're interested in reviewing it, and be prepared to come to the public hearing. To do a public hearing in January kind of squeezes it over the holidays, and I'm not sure that's fair to those that want to come and attend, if there are any.
Sue?
I would say February, but I'm compassionate.
That's fine. Yeah,
You. I'm ambivalent, you know, doesn't really matter to me. We could do, I would be fine with January, or I would be fine with February. That's why I would defer to everyone else to, you know, what your thoughts are.
now, Rich has brought up a good point. A lot of people were screaming at the last hearing that they were left out, they didn't have enough time to do their research, or it was jammed down the township's throat, that kind of thing. So giving them one more month where everyone's recuperating from the holidays, you can sit back, relax, get your stuff into gear, and be prepared, then you should be taking, you know,
Because
2 or 3
people travel in December, and, you know, in all
Yeah.
fairness, to give them proper time
Yeah,
to review this,
yeah.
if they want to look at it online, if they want to download it, or whatever they want to do.
I mean,
If it-
what would be the downside of
Yeah, there's no
waiting?
downside of waiting.
Not at this point.
There's
not-
nothing urgent here.
Yeah, right. Unless we
Well,
have,
there is a potential downside, and that's if some of the issues that we're dealing with here, if somebody approaches the township between now and the public hearing, where some of these, where some of these uses would come into play, we'd have to put them off by 30 days. So that is a potential downside. I don't know that that's a
Yeah, well,
critical downside, but it's a potential downside.
But December's not the month that that's likely to happen.
in general, I mean, the work environment in general, you know, corporation-wise and stuff.
But January is, it would be off our plate in January, because our meeting's the 2nd. So we could, in theory, pass it along to the trustees very early in the year, and it would be relevant. If you wait another month, you're not blocking out December, you're blocking out January. Point of time.
I don't see a downside to that,
Well,
personally.
I'm with Andy, I'm relatively indifferent, and I think I'm ready to go with it. We've kind of, like I said, it's been out there in conversation for a long time, and speaking to the matter of the discontent over the last set of amendments, let's recognize that the last time we did this with 2 or 3 other amendments, and there was a ton of outcry about it. We've now taken up everything that was not, directly, and we've had no participation, no presence, no comment whatsoever on this particular body of work. It was just 1 or 2 particular things that we're not addressing here. So, my observation is I take that lack of we've immediately picked up the agenda and kept it moving, less the controversial things, and we've had no feedback or comment about it from anybody. So I understand the due caution. I'm torn on it. I'm indifferent. If we want to wait another month, I don't see a harm in that. That said, I think we've covered this ground thoroughly, and we could just as easily go forward as well, my opinion. So
Is
if
there
we want to
any,
wait a month, that's fine.
excuse me, is there anything coming down the pipe that you heard that, like Andy says, might involve something here?
Well, I mean, the modifications that we're proposing in the parking section would apply to any new uses that are coming. I think I've mentioned to you that there's some interest from some hotels that are looking into siting in the corridor. One of them has already purchased the property. So, and then with the Drug Mart site being opened up and the ability for additional retail uses down there, we've noted an inquiry from someone trying to do the dry cleaner somewhere in our community. So, I mean, I think there could be, I think it would probably be best, in my opinion,
Move along.
to go ahead and just do it, since if we're not gonna be doing any other changes between now and next month on the text, then we're just gonna meet next month to schedule the public hearing, which might not make sense. And Rich, to your point, if we do the public hearing in January, we could, you know, if there was a lot of people that were here that didn't feel like they had time to review it, we could continue it to February, which would give them additional time. And then the trustees, they typically hold 2 public hearings once it gets to them as
Right.
well.
So there's, yeah, that's true.
They'll at minimum, you know, be 2 opportunities.
And, you know,
for
it's just
public comment, so.
for the purpose of stating it to the record, I'll add to my comment earlier about these amendments being part of the greater batch and a couple things being missed. I think the thing that's at least disappointing to me as far as the comment goes is, to me, I view, as much as there was controversy about some of the overlay district and some of those things, I mean, these things all intertwine with it critically. This, when you consider the input that people had and the things they were concerned about, they looked right past these things as a tool that we're going to manage and address the concerns that they had with respect to the overlay district. And to that point, when a number of us got hit during the election with, you don't care about the township, you haven't done these things, you got all the other accusations that were levied at it, you know, they looked past the time and effort we put in the stormwater mitigation, and they're talking about the growth in the township. And we do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And this stuff is so commonly looked past as, but yet it's so integral and critical. And to Heather's point, you've got Drug Mart being finished, you've got the other retail, the other part of Crowell Crossing getting finished, you've got some of these things moving along. These things are the parking stuff. I mean, you know, people are concerned about traffic and they don't want us to be, you know, well, we're making proactive steps to take on a lot of the concerns that people have about these issues in an area that's growing and developing. And I think it's important to get this stuff out. I mean, I'm indifferent on the month or two, but to add to the fact that here, nobody's paying attention to this right now, and it's just as important as those other things were as well.
I think it's a valid point. I think it's just a lack of awareness.
Yeah.
People don't know these even exist.
Yeah, that's true. I think the fact that the trustees will have, I think getting it along to them, there's more opportunity for people to touch there. I guess
True.
maybe now I drift more to moving things along and.
Yeah, I agree with the idea that if we do get an inordinate amount of questions or issues at the public hearing in January, that we do have the ability to continue.
Yeah, that's it.
And we can always pause and
But we can
continue on.
table,
and let
yeah.
people-
We can keep tabling it,
You know.
not close to public hearing.
But personally, I don't think there's gonna be I don't think there's a, I mean, the last 2 months, we've had public input specifically put on the agenda, okay, for our zoning commission meetings. And we've had 0 involvement, and this has been on both meetings. So I would have to, you can extrapolate from that this material doesn't generate a lot of interest from the public, you know, so,
That's my character.
you know, if there was a lot of concern, people would be here. If there's, you know, evidently there's not.
Well,
So
the younger generation is. They'll go home tonight and really tell their parents all about this, right? Come on, Mom and Dad, you gotta get involved, right?
Typically, we sit here and talk to empty seats.
Empty seats.
It's all, there's nobody here, very few.
We usually have one trustee who's always sitting there. She's not here tonight.
No, I'm kind of following your lead, Morgan. I'm kind of drifting. You know, I was kind of like, either or, but then I think about the fact that we do have the ability to do to continue
Yeah.
the public hearing if it gets out of control. So
Sure.
I say we schedule for January. Let's move forward.
Agreed.
Get it-
Okay.
So we just need
Get her
someone to
done.
Yeah, I
make a-
get it.
Make a motion to accept and schedule
Yeah.
a public hearing for June 2nd.
Okay. So for item number 1 on the agenda for the work session, for the proposed amendments to the following sections of the zoning resolutions, Amendment 1 through 11, I would accept a motion to move to a public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I move, with regard to the work session amendments 1 through 11, that we move forward and schedule a public hearing January 2nd.
Motion's been made. Can I get a second?
I second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No one opposed? Let the record reflect All ayes, no nays. Thank you. Okay, so we'll schedule it for January 2nd for the public hearing. Okay, item number 2 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the October 3rd meeting. Any corrections or?
No, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion, we approve the October 3rd, 2017 minutes as written.
Okay, motion made, second.
I second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None opposed. Okay, item number 3 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the November 7th meeting. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I so move that we accept the minutes as written for November 7th, 2017.
Okay, motion's been made. Can I get a second?
I have to abstain, I wasn't here.
I have to abstain as well, I wasn't.
Oh, no, I
second.
can't second.
Sue?
I'll second the motion.
Good for you. Way to step up.
Sue?
Motion second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None opposed? 2 abstentions. Okay. Item number 5 on the agenda, the audience participation portion. Do we have anybody here that would like to come up and talk, ask us questions, provide input? Anyone?
Now's your chance.
Sir?
Sure.
Yes, sir, you
Please,
must.
yes. You have to get your name, need
have a question.
Great.
your name and address, sir.
Yep. When you come up to the podium, you don't have to swear in, but you can please state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Steve King. I live at 10709 Johnny Cake Ridge Road,
Okay?
near 44 and 84.
Mhm.
My wife and I were just talking about this, and I think my daughter was in on the conversation. Just the area here at 44 in Auburn, that's all completed now. And I drove by and I saw Ryder's was closed. It surprised me. I should be paying attention, but I haven't been, so I saw Ryder's closed, and I came home tonight, I said, Lorraine, why do you think Ryder's closed? She goes, well, I'll tell you why. It's that intersection. Nobody wants to do business at the Sunshine Cafe and the Huntington Bank. And I know that there's probably discussions come up probably a few times, I'm assuming. So my question is, construction's done, there's a lot of planning involved with that. Was there ever a survey or a response since then on what does the community think about that exchange? I know it's probably done for safety reasons or water reasons, but folks pull in there, then they have to go all the way back to the Discovery Lane, I think, Capitol Parkway, to come back to 90 again. So was there ever a post-survey in regards to, was that a good design, kind of a post-review? That's my question. And if there was one, was it majority very favorable? Or if there wasn't one, maybe a lessons learned is maybe that wasn't the best design. If you get that kind of feedback saying that wasn't an optimal exchange layout design. Is that within the confines of this session or no?
May I?
But the problem with that is that those are not township roads.
Okay.
That was
So
all
that whole
done
entire
by,
design had nothing to do with,
no.
okay.
Right, the state
State of
governs
Ohio.
all roads, the state of Ohio. Over the years, there's been talk about trying to
So
go,
Cryle Road is not,
there's one portion of them might involve us, but the rest of the big
Cryle
highways,
Road has nothing to do with this route?
Crowley,
Well, Crowell Road's a
Crowell's a county,
township road.
or
County.
Or county
County
road.
road.
Crowell Road's a county.
County.
Lake County and
Okay.
State of Ohio.
So this is out of scope for this.
Well, and that's, and that's, I think that's, to your questions, I think that's one of the problems that most people have that are residents in the township, is there is a mixture of roads in the township. There are township roads, there are county roads, and there are state roads. And
And
they're
federal.
all under, they're
And
all,
federal.
yeah, and federal, so they're all under different jurisdictions. We only have control and responsibility for the township roads. And I always tell people the easiest way to figure it out is if you see a red truck, it's the township. If you see a green truck, it's the county, and if you see a white truck, it's the state.
Is there an
And
opportunity to give feedback from this group to the folks that
So-
plan that?
When you asked about the design of that, the township and the trustee level and so forth,
they worked with ODOT. There was dialogue, and so that's what the full-time staff here at the township handles that. So it's not really us here, this is zoning, so we're not really into roads, that sort of thing. But ultimately, I mean, the ODOT worked with the township, got feedback from the township. I mean, if you kind of want to know what the trustees said, I'd suggest, recommend asking them some of the same questions.
Sure.
We'd have to answer for you. I don't want to speak for them, but the township did dialogue with them. At the end of the day, ODOT gets to make the decisions about how that goes. Do they listen? Maybe yes, maybe no, but they do pretty much what they want to do. They have their studies, they have their processes and so forth too. So a lot of times with respect to that, and I know a number of us here had a lot of questions during the election about that intersection in particular. ODOT regulates it. ODOT makes the final decision. The best we can do is advocate for the township, and that's the role of the trustees. That's what they do.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for your
Thanks
question.
for asking.
Yep. Anybody else in the audience that would like to make any comments, have any questions? Okay, we will move on to item, I forgot to do the correspondence report. I'm sorry, I apologize. I missed number 4, the correspondence report by the zoning commission members. Frank, anything?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Morgan?
No.
Rich?
No, sir.
Sue? I received an email from a resident on Ravenna Road, and I referred them to you, Heather. They were questioning about somebody had bought a property next door to them on Ravenna, and they immediately started trying to open up a landscaping business or something. And he was wondering if that was allowed within that area. And I basically cited some permitted uses and conditional uses in the R1, because I'm assuming that's where he was, is in the R1 zoning district, and landscaping wasn't a permitted use as far as I could see. But I told him to contact you. You would be able to give him further information or whatever. Did he ever follow up, or?
Yeah, I did get contacted by him, and I investigated the complaint, which the house did recently sell to some individuals who thought they were going to be able to park some of their landscaping equipment there. So I'm in the middle of dealing with that issue. So
Good,
yes,
but we did
yes,
address it, and
yes,
we're taking care of it.
yes,
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because he kind of sent me a couple emails back and forth. I replied, and then
yeah,
like I said, it started getting a little bit beyond my
right,
pay grade, so I thought it would be best to send them your way.
yeah.
And,
We'll investigate any complaint to see if it
Good.
is a violation.
Okay, good. Well, at least
We're
it's-
trying to work with
Yeah.
those people. So
That was my only correspondence, so it was interesting. Okay, I skipped over I skipped the audience portion. We already did that. Next meeting of the zoning commission will be January 2nd of 2018. We're going to have a public hearing scheduled for that meeting. Anything anybody would like to discuss before we adjourn? Anybody? Nothing? This meeting's adjourned. Thanks for coming, folks.